Hey, welcome to Leaving CrazyTown with Finn and Sarah. What are we going to talk about today, Sarah?
Hey, Finn, we have a special guest today. Our friend Megan Swan from the Wellness is a Way of Life or Wellness as a Way of Life podcast. And we met Megan as fellow sober curators. We work for this online magazine and she's a total delight. So we invited her on to talk about something codependency. So we're just going to have a conversation and see where it goes. How are you, Megan?
I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, welcome to our show. Maybe a little later or sometime during our conversation today, you can tell us a little bit about your podcast. We'd love to hear about it.
Sure.
Absolutely. So we usually talk about some kind of relationship struggle or relationship dynamic example where we're doing a certain behavior that might be considered codependent, and then how we saw that maybe worked or didn't work and how we shifted it. And also we often talk about how our codependency affects other people, which is a huge, we call it the big lie. We think we're helping and saving them and fixing them, but really we're not.
Really, we're
So do you,
desperately trying to save ourselves. If they could only change, life would be so much better.
Exactly. It's just
oh man.
somebody else's behavior that needs to be fixed, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you have any scenarios like that in your life, Megan? I'm sure you don't.
No, just like all of them. So it's really hard to pick one, but I think like a sort of macro realization I had over the last year was how, I was so proud of myself for getting sober, and I'm about on Monday, in fact, it's going to be 6 years
All
sober.
right.
That yeah, I just felt so great about myself and accomplished. And so the way that I used to try and control my own alcoholism, I then transferred that onto my husband's drinking and thought, like, if we could just, curate it a little here and there, then it would be better. Or, having it reflect something that it doesn't necessarily. And at the end of the day, this looking at anyone through this microscopic micromanagement, we just weren't evolving as a couple, as you can imagine, because I had set up this power dynamic that, like, I'm the angel and he's the one that needs to work on himself, instead of still being willing to look in the mirror and be like, holy, I don't know if I can swear, but I can really do a lot more work on myself. Like, I need to
Yeah.
stay still. Yeah, well, I
So
think we kind of like go into the teenager mindset, right? Like, just whatever somebody tells you to do, you just with your whole being don't want to do that, and then like be damned if you're actually gonna do it, even though it's probably a good idea.
Right.
oh yeah, it's so
Right.
much
No, but
easier just to hold the space, be yourself, do your work, and they tend to come along with you whether you are meaning it or not. It's crazy.
Yeah,
yeah,
easy.
and so much of it is about communication and, like, obviously trying to control or tell someone what to do, or it's like that's where people just then end up resenting us, right? That's why codependency doesn't work, rather than just sharing our own experience. Geez, honey, it would be, I don't know, whatever you say, it would be really great if we could both be sober together, or whatever, however you want to say it, or just focus on ourselves so they can have the, like you say, the freedom to make choices for themselves. So can you give examples of, like, certain behaviors that definitely didn't work and then what you saw really did work
Yeah, well, I'll
in a
start
more
with what
specific
did
way?
work. Like, what kind of was functional all along is I put a hard boundary, being like, look, at the end of the day, like, one of the major issues for me is because my husband snores. When I first met him, he had sleep apnea, which was so bad that eventually he got that machine, like the dark.
Yeah.
But we found improving, like exercising more, eating more plant-based, like obviously he drinks way less now that I don't drink. And all of these things, like basically he doesn't snore anymore, except when he has like a night out with the guys, right?
Right.
And so I said, look, like, totally happy that you want to do that, but I don't want my sleep interrupted, because that's like really important to me. It's really affects my ability to be a good mom and partner the next day, coach, like all these things. So just please like sleep in the TV room on the couch, whatever time you arrive. And yeah, so that was functional.
Yes.
Yeah, because what are you talking about? You're talking about your needs.
That's right.
Getting your needs met, not his behavior.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it was reasonable. It was like a reasonable request. And then what never worked was, you know, these, I think women are probably better at it, but these sort of like underhanded offside remarks about quantity being consumed in a social situation, or making him feel really guilty about driving post, or like one thing to me that like brought, because I grew up with my father was an alcoholic, and so like there was this direct connection to my ability, like what are those hounds called, like to sniff out, like I could probably tell you how many glasses of red wine a man has had based on their body odor.
The hypervigilance.
Yeah.
So like that's not really enjoyable to be around, right?
Absolutely. Right.
And so even, you know, I again found better ways, be like, hey, would love if you could have a shower or something, in a loving way.
Yes.
Instead of these offhanded comments that were just digs, really.
Right.
Yeah. And I know, like for myself, when people try to give me subliminal messages, so I'm sure you're aware that I'm transgender. So I like lived with female hormones for a long time and now male hormones. And I understood reading between the lines a lot better before I transitioned. And there were so many things I was telling Sarah that I thought were like, you know, I do the same thing growing up a feminist, like men and they're you know, whatever, one track minds, and they're not aware, and they're outside with a coat on. The kids are in t-shirts. Like, why aren't they paying attention to this stuff? And after I transitioned, I was like, oh, a lot of it's biological, like, because I cannot pick up subliminal messages like I used to be. I don't read between the line. I will tell my friends, like, what are you trying to say? I don't, like, tell me.
Go ahead.
I have to tell them, like, and I thought I was like losing my mind or something. But I have a therapist who works with people who transition, and he's seen over 30 years, like, all the differences, and how, like, they're just things you don't know about before you transition unless you've been talking to someone, and to try to navigate it and not know why suddenly I can't juggle 14 things at work. I can only do one project at a time. I can still do it effective, but when I was trying to do 14 and only having the ability to focus on one now, I was like, what is wrong with me? So I had to have guidance with that. But the whole message thing and the little digs or the whatever, like, nope.
Yeah, well, I mean, I learned Alison Armstrong. I don't know, her book title is escaping me right now, but the number one thing that for me, it was just like, was understanding that testosterone helps you focus on one thing. So a man walks into the living room and he wants to watch football. Like, all he's going to do is arrive and watch the football. And he doesn't even see, you know, the dish that might need to be picked up, or the cushion out of place, or the temperature of the room even immediately. Whereas a woman, and estrogen is like a diffusing hormone. So we're like constantly scanning our environment, and like, I don't, maybe it's not true for all women, but I think a lot of women can relate to this. Once you've noticed something, like, you can't really relax until it's fixed, you know, whatever your perception of it needing to be fixed is. And even just understanding that, I mean, it did a lot for also raising boys. But yeah, my relationship with my husband, understanding like it's not an intentional not noticing, it's the capacity and superpower with testosterone, are really just focus on one thing. And I think for a lot of women, that's really challenging.
You know, this is reminding me of so many patients, clients I've had in the past that wanted their husbands to read their minds. And it's like so great to hear you guys, because it's so true. Like, the whole idea that we're all responsible for getting our needs met, but we want people to know, and that part of our job is to speak up and let people know. I mean, do you know how many like days after birthdays, days after Valentine's Day, days after Christmas, as women would come in a rage because they didn't guess what they want? I'm like, did you tell? Did you give it? You know, but it's
Now
like
you just have to talk close to their iPhone and then like, they'll start seeing ads, right?
but
Those
you know,
ads
people,
that are popping up are purposeful.
but the whole
better
idea
for
that
it.
well, codependency is like blaming someone else for how you feel, and that it's our responsibility to express our needs and wants. So this is a great topic. And differences between men and women is a great topic. Go ahead.
Well, and I think like part of a common thing is the longer you get in a relationship with someone, the more you assume they should be able to read your minds.
Great.
Mind, right? So then it's like this added resentment based on nothing. It's
Right.
like you've evolved, like you're basically not the same person that you started with, you know, this relationship for, in our case, it's almost 15 years.
Yep.
We were actually just looking at a photo outside of my office here, and it's like, I look so young in that picture. I'm like, wow, 15 years ago. And he's like, you look the same or better. I'm like, yeah, I know.
So see, he's saying exactly what you probably wanted to hear right there.
Yeah, so he's learned.
So Megan, I have a question. You talked a little bit about what wasn't working, giving the digs, and then how you were speaking to your husband now. How did you come to that awareness? Were you frustrated, or did somebody call your attention to it? You know, you had this epiphany where you realized, wait, what I'm doing isn't working. And I'm just curious, what was the process in that for you?
Wow. Well, there's a lot, but I think really just realizing it's not working. And so us coming to an agreement, like, okay, if we want to evolve as a couple, like we need to change some things. So we first started by trying to find, by the way, I'm going to become a bilingual couples therapist because there are like 12 in the entire United States. And they are booked out for years. So this challenge of finding, because we didn't want someone that was here local in our town. So we eventually found a woman in Mexico City. And yeah, so I guess agreeing that it's not working and then sort of taking that responsibility, both of us, that, okay, like we need outside support. We need like a different point of view. Like we're just having the same conversation over.
Yes.
Neither of us feels like it's getting anywhere. So I guess, you know, some humility and vulnerability and accepting it's not working.
Yes.
And we both committed, like for multiple layers and reasons, like as to why we want to move forward. And this needs to evolve in order to make it, you know, like not only sustainable, but like something that we're both excited about going forward with.
Yes.
And so this therapist like didn't really work out in terms of the couple. We met with her twice, but she did recommend that I read Melody Beattie's Codependency book. And that was like, started this chain reaction, right? And he really resonated with her. So then this thing that I've been asking him to do, which is go to therapy or find a coach or like do something. Cause like I being a coach, I can be a model and like really shape our household in a lot of ways, but I can't be his coach, right?
Right.
I need him to go find another coach and want to work with the coach. Obviously, that's the other part of coaching. Like if you're there because someone's forced you to find help, work. And so, you know, planting seeds of like, hey, here's this male coach, you know, like, I think it might be really great that you have a male coach, but here's some other options. This person's like an ex-surgeon, so they speak your language on that, and like nothing stuck. So ironically, this woman that like, I didn't really, you know, she had her purpose, but I just didn't think she was going to help us in terms of our couplehood. But he's stuck with her. So the other chain reaction was, okay, so now he sees the value in having someone that's outside the relationship just to even vent to.
Yes.
And, you know, she's given him little tiny different ways to look at his behavior that, of course, I've been telling him for 10 years, but it's it's on deaf ears, right? But or maybe she's done it in a way that met him culturally that I couldn't do. I don't know. But I mean, there's all these pieces that you need to be open to seek out outside support. And I think open to, you might not find it the right person right away. You know, like it's kind of like dating with all of
Right.
these types of, you know, therapy or coaching, all these things, you don't necessarily find the right person right away. Or, you know, in my case, like you appreciate that you got what you needed in a few sessions, and then like they're this
Yes.
domino effect to like what's the next step for you, and maybe it's working with somebody else or a different modality or whatever it is.
Yeah, I know a lot of people in different spiritual practices, therapy or other things in recovery or other areas, they get the solution, it works well for a little bit. They have a relationship with that therapist or person, and then they just keep beating the drum after it's dead. And they got what they were supposed to get, and they don't want to make the change, you know? So there's two ways it could go. You could say, "Oh, this doesn't work," and throw the whole thing away, or you could keep trying with somebody where you've already got what you needed instead of what's the next step? Like it
Right.
constantly evolving is so important. And it sounds like you really went from a place of he needs to change to I want our relationship to be effective and work well and go forward. So what do we need to do? And that I
Right.
think that's yeah. So I don't know. I'm not
I
even
was
sure how long we've been chatting, but I think you've got a great point. I would love to hear a little bit about your channel. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but my experience with Megan so far is like she's super aware, knows what's going on, humble and looking at this stuff and articulates it well. So you know, I'd love people to check out your podcast and you know, I'd love to hear a little bit about it if you want to share with us that.
Yeah, so it's called Wellness is a Way of Life, and it's evolved as a podcast as well. I'm on my fifth season, and this season I decided to really kind of hone in on a few key topics instead of it being sort of all over the map wellness. I definitely have really special guests that I think are doing incredible things in their own realm. And then I do some solo episodes. So themes I'm focusing on this year are perimenopause and menopause, and really having some experts talk, because I think this is a really
huge.
exploding thing for a lot of women. I mean, I can't even remember what the stat is, but the amount of women that are going to be going into menopause on the planet in the next 10 years is like an astronomical number. And it's so has changed so much since like my mom, you know, I saw my mom go through it. And so I think women need to like to be updated with the science. And another thing I really am fascinated about is cacao. And maybe that's
Oh,
strange, but there's
yeah.
actually a really, well, one, I live in Chiapas and they produce cacao here. But there's like a really special relationship between feminine energy and women's hormones and cacao. And I really just think it's such a great alternative to coffee. I also love coffee, but it's like a softer and it's a natural energy booster. So I think it's like something. So I did a series of episodes, different angles on cacao. What else? Talking about movement. I always talk about how we need to kind of change our perception of how movement can come and be like away from the traditional exercise or not, you know, like just functional movement, just activity into your day to day. You know, if you can layer in nature, or, you know, maybe you're doing it with a friend or you're doing it to music that you love, like these are all, but just kind of mindful movement and being more active is so healing and important, I think, to all people, but particularly, you know, women as we age. It's such a great tool. And yeah, I'm forgetting some of the other themes that I'm focusing on this
Wow.
year.
It's amazing. I already thought of a few people to refer to it. I have a friend who's in her 30s and she just recently had a hysterectomy and was telling me, she's like, I can't even get out of bed. I don't know what's wrong with me. So going from that being thrown completely into menopause and the energy, and I don't, she's saying she's feeling really depressed and going through a lot of stuff and not having any idea like or support as to what's actually going on with her body, you know.
Yeah, and there's so many, both in Canada and the United States, less so in Europe, but like, you know, medicine from 20 years ago is still all afraid with hormonal therapy when it's really nuanced and there's a lot more information. And also, you know, women are tending to be prescribed antidepressants instead of hormonal therapy. And just as under, like, it's only in 1996 that we understood that estrogen is not a sex hormone. Estrogen is like one of the most important hormones for all activity in your body, particularly your brain. And so just understanding like it's not just about balancing yourself out, if you will, from the fact that you're, and they usually talk about like your ovaries stop working. It's like, no, they're transitioning into the next phase, or they're just not working isn't like a helpful it's
interpretation.
Like, yeah, it's like naturally you're going into this different phase, and then
Right.
all the benefits to women in menopause. I think it's there's like so much talked about. I won't go on.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
It sounds like you're doing some great stuff. It was so good to have you on the show. We love you. We will recommend people to your podcast. And Finn, anything else? We're wrapping it up.
Excellent. We have Megan Swan, people. All right.
Yes.
Thank
And
Thank you so
fasten
much.
your
You
seatbelt.
guys are awesome.
We're leaving CrazyTown. We're out of here.